And welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, and as always, I'm delighted to be a part of your world, and thank you for being a part of mine. The commitment of this show is to not only inform and educate you as the viewer, but to empower you to make sound financial decisions for you and your family. And today I have an awesome guest who will be talking about a difficult subject for all of you. So sit down and learn, because this is a biggie, and that has to deal with bankruptcy. I have as my guest for the next hour Richard E. West, attorney at law who specializes in debt relief, including bankruptcy. And he's going to explain, as well as allow me to explore with him, all of the intricacies of bankruptcy. Are you overwhelmed with medical bills? Are you overwhelmed with problems that are a result of a job loss? Are you going through a divorce that is devastating you? Are you experiencing challenges with regard to trying to maintain your standard of living because of credit card debt, or your mortgage, you can't seem to get on target with that? We're going to be talking about all of that for the next hour. So without any more delay, I'm going to go right into the content of the program and ask you to be attentive. I can assure you that someone you know right now needs to know this information. So call them, text them, whatever you need to do, and let them know to listen to this program on bankruptcy. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so delighted to have you here as my guest. Where do we want to begin? Let's talk about you, because you have a fascinating story yourself.
Well, I wasn't always a debt relief specialist when I started practicing. Pardon me. Back in 1986, I was a general practitioner, and I did all kinds of different legal services for the community.
Okay.
Unfortunately, what happened in 1993 was a very serious injury that I sustained. I actually fell off of the roof of my house.
Oh my God.
And broke my back.
Oh my God.
And very fortunate, God has blessed me. I'm walking today, and it wasn't what it could have been, but I was unable to work for a year, and during that period of time had to close my practice down. I didn't have any income. I used up quickly all of my savings, sold everything that I had, went through basically everything that I could liquidate, and then started to live on borrowed money. I had to borrow on credit cards. I actually paid my mortgage on a credit card, fed my family on credit cards, and ended up being unable to pay them, and got sued by attorneys who I knew. And they would not.
Who were just doing their job.
And that's what they said. They said, Rick, you know, it's nothing personal, buddy. Mm-hmm. It's just our job. Well, right. It sure felt personal to me.
I know it did.
And with God's help, I got back in the saddle, so to speak, reopened my practice. And, you know, I'd always done bankruptcy work for people since I started practicing in 1986. That was always one of the things that I really believed in, and I saw the tremendous benefit that it gave to people who really needed it. But now I experienced the debt relief work that I did in a very different way. Because of my personal experience, I understood in a way that wasn't possible for me to understand before exactly how my clients feel. And so it wasn't very long after that I closed my general practice and began to specialize only in debt relief.
And that was in what year, would you say?
1993. So it's been 20 years now that I've been specializing in bankruptcy. But not just bankruptcy, I also counsel my clients on all forms of debt relief. I believe that it's not appropriate for everyone to file a bankruptcy. Sometimes a debt management plan will work very well. Sometimes credit counseling is really all somebody needs. There are some circumstances that are appropriate for debt settlement programs, and all of these are non-bankruptcy options. I'm a certified credit counselor, and I'm also a certified debt arbitrator, as well as being one of only 11 board-certified consumer bankruptcy specialists in the state of Ohio.
That's very impressive. That's very impressive.
It's my goal to make sure when I analyze a family's circumstances that we look at everything. I don't want to pigeonhole someone into a bankruptcy if a non-bankruptcy option will work as well or better.
Let me ask you a question, because obviously with my background in credentialing as well, I have been involved with, since 1982, with people in terms of money and finances, and this issue of bankruptcy still seems to be under a cloud of misinformation, poor information, or no information. As so many people, given this crushing economic scenario that we have been under since 2007, and still are, still are. What is a person to do? What would you say is an indicator that a person is in trouble or a family is in trouble?
There are many. You mentioned at the beginning of the show some precipitating events, and those kinds of things, divorce, job loss, serious medical situation, often take a perfectly stable financial situation and turn it on its head. And so people begin to resort to paying their living expenses on credit cards. That can be a red flag. Certainly payday loan lending is an indicator that there is a potential problem. And now in Ohio, as you know, we have car title loans available, which I was sad to see come to the state of Ohio.
I was so sad about that, Mr. West. Terrible.
And although there's a place for all of these things in certain circumstances, I see them regularly in my bankruptcy cases, and so they would be indicators. Another indication that there may be problems is when you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so you skip a bill this month because you have to pay another bill, and so you sort of pay the creditor that screams the loudest. Or, and this affects our senior population significantly, and it's alarming to me that people will go without buying their medication
to pay a bill.
To pay a credit card bill, which would be totally either resolved in a settlement outside of bankruptcy, or in many cases completely discharged with no payment at all in a bankruptcy context. So people actually harm themselves by they deprive themselves of medical attention so that they can pay a credit card bill or other dischargeable bill. Or they run their thermostats so low in the winter or don't use air conditioning when they need it in the summertime that they're actually living an unhealthy lifestyle due to financial pressure.
That is, in my opinion, so terribly offensive, because seniors have labored so hard. And many of them, and you and I both know, Mr. West, that the statistics say that seniors are filing bankruptcy. Seniors are under extreme pressure financially, much of it medically related.
True.
Meaning they're using credit cards to buy their medications because the medications are overpriced and abhorrent. And then they find themselves dealing with just the cost of staying well.
That's true. I have seen in my own practice an increasing number of seniors who need to file bankruptcy. And the problem with particularly my senior clients is that they grew up in a world, an economic world that's much different than the one we live in today.
So true.
When you take someone in their, say, late 60s or 70s, when they were growing up, working on paying off their house and managing their credit, a bankruptcy would cause them to not be able to get credit, maybe lose a lot of property, maybe not be able to buy a house. And they all heard these stories, and it was just ingrained in our senior population that you don't file bankruptcy under any circumstances, and if you do, prepared to lose everything. But that's not true today, and in fact, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, Ohio just this week has a law change that favors seniors, and it's been a problem that I have wrestled with, often without a good answer, for my entire professional career, and now we have an opportunity to really help some seniors who have worked all their lives, paid off their houses or paid the mortgage down to the point where they've got some significant equity, and now we can help these folks in a way we couldn't before.
So let me, help me to understand this law. Is it specifically advantageous to the senior population? Does it protect seniors that have accumulated significant equity in their homes and yet find themselves literally at the disposal of debt collectors and a variety of people that are coming after them for unpaid bills? What exactly does this law do?
The law is not specifically geared to any age group. Rather,
Okay.
it is the homestead exemption, the amount of equity that we are allowed to protect in a bankruptcy filing. Just a brief history, Ohio had one of the smallest for years and years and years at $5,000 equity per person. So if a married couple had more than $10,000 worth of equity, they either had to go into a Chapter 13 bankruptcy and pay back some or all of their debt, or they simply were ineligible as a practical matter to file because they would lose their home. Well, in 2006, shortly after the Bankruptcy Reform Act was passed, Ohio increased its homestead exemption to $20,000 approximately per person.
Okay.
Okay, and that opened up an opportunity for a lot more people who used to have more equity than they could protect in a Chapter 7, and so that expanded the eligible population for 7s. But still, many of my clients, my seniors, had houses totally paid off.
Yes.
100,000, 150,000, certainly not mansions on the hill, but they worked all their lives to pay it off, and because they did that, they were essentially being penalized in terms of the available relief. Now this week, Ohio's homestead exemption goes to $125,000.
What?
Per
Per
person.
person?
Yes.
$125,000 per person.
Exactly.
$250 for a couple?
Yes.
Which means that that's protected from creditor attachment?
Right. We can, there is the possibility now of completely paid off homes being totally protected from creditors.
Oh, this is a blessing from heaven.
It is. We went from one of the lowest exemption states in the country, now we're on the high end. So
But that is, you know what, and I hear the argument, I do, which is, well, they should have paid their bills, or they should have done this, but to me, there's no place like home. And when people have to, on top of all the crushing debt and the sorrow and the grieving that accompanies your dilemma, at the point you have to walk away from your home to pay off creditors, that is just something I've never been comfortable with. I don't like it.
it is emotionally devastating.
Yes.
For someone who has worked all of their life to contemplate the possibility that they will not be able to keep what they've struggled all their lives for. Now we don't have to.
That is so amazing, Mr. West. May I ask who sponsored that bill? That's a congressman that needs to get reelected.
You know, the name escapes me off the top of my head, but there have been actually, truthfully, a lot of people working
behind the scenes
to promote this.
This is such good news for so many people, but especially seniors.
Really, and we need to get the word out to them because they're a hard population to educate.
Yes, they are.
Because many of them have, believed for so long that bankruptcy was not an option, that when they finally come in to see me and I explain to them that it really is, it's almost like a whole new world is opened up to them.
Yes.
And really, in a way, it is, because they're going to be able to pay for their medications and buy the food and pay their utility bills and basically their living expenses and have a healthy lifestyle and not have to do it on credit, because many of them have fixed incomes. If we could just wipe out all the debt that they accumulated and save the home, they'd be fine.
Right.
On a going forward basis, would not fall back into debt.
Well, so many of them, haven't you found in your private practice, that so many of them have gotten themselves into this hole because they've been trying to deal with a fixed income and escalating expenses. Everything is going up but their income.
That's true, but my experience with my seniors is that they're really pretty resourceful group of people,
Uh-huh.
and they'll find ways to coupon and cut back and make things work a little longer and maybe do with a little less. So under most circumstances, they can really make the kinds of adjustments that keep them from going into to debt. What typically happens in what I see happening, something happens to upset the balance that they've put together. It could be an illness. It could be, I'll tell you what happens a lot.
Okay.
And it's like, I even have a name for it. It's called the heart is bigger than wallet problem. And that is...
Don't talk about family and kids.
That's exactly right.
Oh my God.
You would have no idea.
Oh, yes I do.
How many bankruptcies I file for parents and grandparents not because of their own financial situation, but because they're helping out their kids, their children, their grandchildren, beyond their ability really to do so.
So they have predator family members.
Not intentionally, perhaps. Sometimes they are being taken advantage of. I see that too. But that accounts for an awful lot of bankruptcy cases.
That's amazing information. I did not know that. I will tell you, I have a definite disdain for children and grandchildren leeching off of their grandparents, because grandparents love their children. And as you get older, that emotion becomes more real because of the issue of mortality, and you're looking at your future in these children. And the tendency is to want to help. But that's the group that's least able to bounce back.
True.
Because once the money's gone, Mr. West, the money is gone.
Yeah, and frequently they say to me, well, you know, I can't go out and get a second job now. I'm too old. I can't go in and work 20 hours overtime every week like I used to be able to do to catch up on my bills and the things that folks used to do. And now, even actually, even if they were healthy enough and felt like they could, the job market is so different that oftentimes it's not an available option, even though they want to and perhaps could.
Well, certainly as you look at the aging of America, which is the most profound demographic.
It is.
Period. The fact that we're there, Mr. West.
Absolutely.
We are right on that track with 77 million other people that are retiring and aging and dealing with all kinds of issues that we had not anticipated. And
you know, and there's another aspect that often catches people aware, but I think particularly seniors, and that is the amount of interest that they pay on their debt is not something that a lot of them are paying close attention to, even though I was really happy a few years ago when the federal law changed and the credit card companies were then required to put information on the statement so that you see how much interest you're paying and how much you'll pay if you only make minimum payments. I used to have a chart that I would show people before that law changed. And I said, look at what you're paying if we don't get this under control. Now, it's on the statement, but a lot of people don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. They're more interested, in other words, and this is really more your expertise, they're more interested in their monthly payments than getting out of debt. And we seem to be a society as a whole looking more at how much is it going to cost me every month rather than how soon can I get it paid off and be out of debt.
Well, that gets back into a whole conversation, probably for another show, about the psychology of debt and the fact that in the financial services and banking industry, the training is to talk to people about payments, even down to your mortgages. I tell people that when you look at that, when you go to the closing of your loan and you look at what the principal amount is, and then you look at how much you're going to repay, even at a low rate of interest, interest compounds. And you wind up paying 2 to 3 times the value of the home easily to a bank. And then you're paying interest on your car. And so when people get ready to retire, they say, why don't I have any money? And I said, because you took all of your earnings and you paid interest to the bank. So your money left your pocket and did a one-way to the bank to pay for these things that you have. So that's very, very interesting. That is. So let's talk about the process of when a person comes in to you. Take me through that scenario. What is involved?
Well, I do things a little differently. A lot of times, I'll just ask someone to call the office and set up a telephone conference with me.
Oh, really?
Sure. I find that I can get information to people without them having to drive to my office. The appointment scheduling is a little more flexible, and we can talk on the phone, and I can get a feel for what this family's financial circumstances might be. Sometimes telephone advice is all they need.
Okay,
and I'm
so
happy
is this pro bono work you're doing? I mean, is there no charge for them calling in?
There's no charge for the telephone call.
Okay.
If I can help someone with a few words, kind of get them in the right direction, or give them some suggestions to try and investigate first, then maybe that's all they need. And so I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
If it seems on the telephone call that we probably ought to sit down and go through a little bit more in-depth analysis, then what we'll typically do is have them schedule an appointment to see either myself or one of my counselors or other attorneys that work in my office. We have offices all over the Dayton area, so it's a short drive.
Are you south? Do you have any office presence in the southern Ohio area?
We do. We actually just opened an office in Kenwood.
Oh, Kenwood. That's right down the road from my offices in Blue Ash.
And I have an office also in Fairfield.
Okay,
So
good. Conveniently located for inside the Beltway.
Right.
As well as outside in southern Ohio. That's good to know for our viewers down there.
We have an office in Fairborn as well.
Yes,
one by the Dayton Mall, and then our home office is in Springboro.
Okay, good.
We're actually thinking about opening up an office in Huber Heights.
Yes,
because
right.
there are a lot of people in Huber are struggling. Vandalia, that area, so north of town a little bit. We're probably going to be opening up an office there later on. So we're sort of spread out.
Well, that's good, though, because the problem, I mean, you're able to represent people anywhere in the state of Ohio, correct?
Well, that's true. As a practical matter, though, we basically try to stay from, say, Tip City down to the river.
Okay, Tip City to Cincinnati.
Right, because we've got, the bankruptcy district is Dayton and Cincinnati, so all of that surrounding area is basically my area of representation.
Okay, good. So I come in and I've talked to you over the phone and you feel that I need to come in for a sit down. What exactly should I be prepared to discuss?
Well, again, that consultation is at no charge. We just want to talk and find out what direction you might need to go in as far as, and what your goals are. And that's another thing that's very important. I won't know. It's almost like a doctor. I can't prescribe a treatment until I know what are all the symptoms, and I also want to know what the goals are. Some people want to keep their home, but they're behind for 6 months. Some people have made the decision that because of the drop in real estate values, that financially speaking, they really don't want to keep the house. They want to let it go. So goals are very, very important. So if I know a family's goals and then I can find out what their circumstances are, then we can begin to apply that knowledge to the range of debt relief options. As I said earlier, because I'm a credit counselor, I always like to start with budgets. First thing I want to do is look at your budget. I want to see what's coming in and what has to go out and what's left over for debt service. Depending on how much we have there, that's going to tell me what effective options we might have available. It could be credit counseling is a good way to go. And I am familiar with local credit counseling agencies that do a good job. I'm pretty leery, honestly, of a lot of these internet-based
think they're scams.
Many of them are.
I mean, you know, internet is like heaven and hell, depends upon what side of the fence you're on. And how do you know? How do you know, particularly when they start collecting money?
The common thread that I see, and I see a lot of people who come to me not first, but after being in a program that has failed for 2 or 3 more years, and quite the most common scenario, honestly, is when they finally get sued. Because the debt management companies, the debt settlement companies are not attorneys. They cannot represent consumers in lawsuits. And so when that happens, basically the debt management company says, well, you need to go see a lawyer at this point.
Right.
But the sad thing there is the consumer has wasted sometimes years and thousands of dollars in a failed program. And many of them do fail. So I'm very skeptical of those because I see the very high failure rate. I'm not saying that they don't sometimes work, because I know that sometimes they do. I've talked to people who have been through them. But And I couldn't tell you whether most of them fail or not. I can only report my own experiences that a lot of them don't work. And people waste time and money.
Well, at the point you wasted your time, you have cost yourself money.
Right, and sometimes options become less available the further you get behind. And the deceptive thing that people don't pay attention to is that the mortgage companies don't scream. They don't call you on the phone, and they're not as vocal as the credit cards companies. So people will get behind in their house paying credit cards just to make the phone stop ringing.
Right.
So we have these kinds of conversations a lot. So if I'm looking at the budget, I look whether or not debt settlement or debt management program, there are good local organizations that can help people, and I make a lot of referrals. About 30% of the people who come to see me,
yes,
I don't recommend a bankruptcy for them.
Really?
Yes, about 30% of the people who come to me do not, in my professional opinion, need, at least not at that point anyway, need to file bankruptcy. They're better off trying a non-bankruptcy approach, or in some cases, and this again, the senior population offers some unique opportunities, and one of them is the, and this shocks them honestly, the do-nothing approach.
The do-nothing approach for
Yes.
seniors.
Right.
Tell me more.
It's not uncommon for a couple to come in to see me and their only income is Social Security.
Okay.
Okay. And maybe they've got a house paid for, or maybe they're renting, but the fact is that if a creditor were to sue someone whose income is Social Security, they cannot garnish the Social Security check. Now, the creditor has other ways of collecting. They can put liens on property, and there are things that can be done. But one of the things that particularly my seniors are concerned about is, can they garnish my income? Okay, because as they grew up, they kind of heard of people getting their paycheck garnished, and and all the problems that go along with that. But a Social Security income is not wages, and in Ohio, creditors can only garnish wages. So my seniors are protected by law from creditor garnishments on their Social Security checks. So maybe if they've got a situation where they got behind, maybe they were sued, maybe they weren't, but whatever it is taken care of now, maybe they just need to not do anything except tell the creditor, honestly, I'm sorry, I don't have the money, I wish it were otherwise, but I can't pay you. They don't need to file a bankruptcy.
But the telephone's not going to stop ringing, though, Mr. West. That phone's going to ring.
You're absolutely right.
And so if they're nervous, like, ooh, then, you know.
Excellent point. Let me share a little story with you.
Okay, I'm listening.
Once upon a time, I had a lady come to see me, and I would say she was probably in her mid to late 70s.
Okay.
And she was one of these people on Social Security. And she came into my office, and we went through everything, and I said to her, ma'am, you know, your only income is Social Security. You could, it's an option for you to do nothing. Just explain to the creditors that you can't pay and you wish it were otherwise, but really you don't have the extra money. She looked at me and she said, now, Mr. West, how much do you think I weigh? Now, she didn't seem like she weighed very much, but I would not hazard to guess her weight.
Okay.
Not a gentleman. I said, ma'am, you don't look like you weigh very much, but tell me, why do you ask me the question? She says, well, I weigh, and it was very much, because I cannot sleep, I cannot eat. The creditor harassment is literally killing me, Mr. West. I have to file to make it stop. And although at the time her income was enough to take care of her living expenses, it wasn't enough to take care of the debt. We filed her case.
So that
basically for health reasons.
Okay.
And so there are folks who can put up with the harassment a little better than others. Some folks really need to file to make that phone stop ringing.
Because that would have to be, it's been my experience, that the ability of collection agencies to call you nonstop, because it is a business, and what that does to the emotional stability of people on the other end with that phone ringing all the time. And I tell them, well, don't answer the phone, put it on phone, block it, but then they call through all. But I certainly understand what you're saying about the legalities of the Social Security. Although I must say this, I read in AARP not a couple of years ago where collection agencies have actually been able to pierce the law and took the money. And then it's like, well, I took the money, now sue me. Try to get the money back. Have you had that happen in your experience?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, they'll take the money and then.
Well,
okay.
here, and it's very, very inconvenient.
Okay.
And the way it happens.
To put it lightly.
And what I tell my seniors is, you need to protect yourself, and here's how. Okay, here's the scenario, and it does happen. Your Social Security is oftentimes direct deposited into your bank account.
Correct.
Okay? Now, a creditor who has sued a senior or some other person has a judgment. With that judgment, then they can garnish, they can't garnish Social Security, but they can hit bank accounts.
Yes.
Okay? Now, when that happens, the bank account gets frozen, and you're supposed to get a little card in the mail saying, if you wish to contest this, fill this card out within 5 days and return it to the court, and the court will schedule a hearing on your opposition to the garnishment. Well, if all of this is done properly and the person fills out the card and goes to court and says, hey, this is Social Security income. Here's my Social Security statement. It matches my deposit to my bank. It clearly is Social Security, and the creditor should not be allowed to take it. The judge will make the creditor give the money back. Okay? But what has happened in the meantime? Well, all the checks that were written against that account have now bounced, and all of the bank fees. And honestly, there are many people who look at the card and they're either confused or they don't know what to do, and they just figure, well, I guess I'm out the money. And they even though they could get it back, they don't.
So may I ask, because you're an attorney and you're familiar with the court system, if this does in fact occur for a senior where their money has been swiped,
right,
and they need their money to live on because it's first of the month and checks are bouncing and all that kind of stuff, would it be better strategically if a senior is having credit issues to not immediately when their money deposits to pull it out? Would that be a logical strategy if you're in a survival mode?
Tell them to do that.
Get their money out every month.
And they can pay bills with cashier's checks or money orders. There are ways to protect yourself from creditors who have judgments when you're in this situation. And a lot of times if someone comes to see me or if I'm talking to them on the phone and I find this to be the situation, I give them this little list of tips so that they can arm themselves. Knowledge is power.
Oh, but knowledge in practice is even better.
And so, a lot of times, the conversation will end. They're happy. They find that they don't need any kind of a program or a bankruptcy. They've got some tips to help them protect themselves from creditors, and really that's all they needed.
Can I ask you, besides Social Security, are there any other cash assets that are protected from seizure? With pension fund money, your normal regular pension check coming in?
Well, all of those are, well, we'll put it in the negative. You can't garnish anything that's not wages.
Got it. And a pension is not a wage.
A pension is not a wage.
Right.
Retirement benefits, not a wage.
Right.
Social Security,
disability.
Not. All of those things protected from garnishment.
Okay.
Sure.
So what can a creditor go after? He goes after people that are working, that have income from actual working, not passive income.
That's well, there are other kinds of passive incomes. If we had, let's just say that someone has a rental property.
Correct.
Rents come in. Those can be taken from the bank account.
Okay.
Okay. If you're in business, it's actually an account receivable. That could be garnished.
Yes.
So there are, depending on the circumstances, and that's why it's helpful just to pick up the phone and call.
And call you. What is your telephone number?
It's 748 1749.
1749, area code
937.
937.
Yeah, and I have a website, debtfreeohio.com.
Debtfreeohio.com.
Easy to remember.
Also, I wanted to just kind of zoom in if we could. This book is available to anyone that would like it. Mr. West makes this book that he wrote, authored, called Debt Free Just Ahead. And I would like for those of you that are having some challenges to consider calling his office and getting the book and reading it. It's a simple read. It's easy to understand. He's taken a very complex subject, I might say, and simplified it in a way that's understandable to most consumers. Is that a fair representation?
That's what I tried to do with the
Okay,
book.
because this is great. I want to get a zoom in. Can I get a zoom in on this book, please? Can I? Okay, well, I tried anyway.
If you go to the website, debtfreeohio.com, the phone number's there. Just call us up. We'll be happy to send a copy out. The thing that's unique about this book is I bring together the non-bankruptcy and the bankruptcy options all in one spot. And the reason I became a credit counselor in the first place, one of the reasons, is because I found that there was a separation of the information that everybody needed to know. The debt management people know debt management, but they're not lawyers typically, and so they can't give legal advice on bankruptcy. And they don't know anything about credit counseling. They only sell debt management services. So to get their story, you go see them. Now, if you want to talk to the credit counseling people, they have the same kind of limitations. They're not lawyers. But if you go to lawyers, none of them are credit counselors, so they can't give you the non-bankruptcy options. So I decided if I was going to make sure that my clients get the broad analysis, so they get the right answer, that I would simply go back to school and become a credit counselor and debt arbitrator and get the certification. And that's why I did it, to make sure that whoever comes to see me is going to they're going to know when we're done that no stone has been left unturned, and all of the options, non-bankruptcy and bankruptcy, have been fully discussed so that they know they've got the right decision. And again, 30% of them, not bankruptcy at all.
That is so good. When you refer a person over to debt counseling, when is that not good enough?
If I make the referral, then it appears that it probably would be.
Okay.
Sometimes,
humans are humans.
Sometimes circumstances will change.
Okay.
You know, the income that might have included some overtime, for example, making it possible to make a budget work, might disappear.
Okay.
Other life circumstances might intervene, or the budgeting skills or self-discipline may fail, and people find that it's just too hard for them to stick to that kind of a budget for the length of time necessary for it to be successful. And that's not a personal failing. If it happens to be that that's just, you know, this family situation, then you need to recognize that and deal with it in a different way. And so sometimes people will come back to me and they'll say to me, Mr. West, we really tried. It's just not working out. You know, we don't think that we're going to be able to be successful, and we're falling behind and missing payments. Maybe a bankruptcy would be a better way. But you know, even for those people, if we do end up filing a bankruptcy, they know that they gave it their best shot. And that gives them a tremendous sense of satisfaction.
Right.
So sometimes it doesn't work out, and many times it does.
So let's talk about some of the most common bankruptcy myths.
Oh, one of my favorite subjects.
Oh no, let's talk about that, because I mean, really, this is such a good story right now. And again, relating it to seniors, but really this is just about everybody. Okay.
And it is the myth that bankruptcy ruins your credit.
Well, that's what I thought, and I've been in financial services for 30 plus years. Does it?
Doesn't have to. It can.
Okay.
It depends on how it's handled. And that's another reason why it's very helpful in my practice to have the credit counseling piece involved, because a bankruptcy, the way, in my book and in my practice, I describe the recovery process as having 3 pillars or parts.
Okay.
The 3 pillars of financial recovery, the way I approach it. Number 1, we have to deal with the debt. Now that can be with a bankruptcy or not with a bankruptcy, but typically with a bankruptcy, people are pretty much resigned that their credit's going to be bad. In many cases, it's already bad when we start.
I was going to say,
and it can only go up from there.
Yeah, you can only go up.
You'd be surprised how many people come to see me with perfect payment histories.
Perfect payment history?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
File BK? Why?
Yes. Because the month that they come to see me, that perfect payment record has come to an end.
Oh, my goodness.
They've depleted their savings. They've gone through their retirement. They've emptied their 401k. They've sold their property.
God.
They've done everything that they can to make those payments on time. And now they come to see me and they say, Mr. West, I've never missed a payment in my life, but I'm not going to be able to make next month's bills. I need help.
Wow. That is
it's so
absolutely sad. So they've exhausted all of their assets to pay creditor debt.
Right.
And now that they're broke, here you are.
Even though the 401k, the IRA, the 403b, were all of those ERISA qualified retirement accounts were totally and completely protected, could not have been touched by creditors if the creditors wanted to forcibly take it, but because they didn't understand, the consumers gave it away.
Oh my word. Let me restate this. Viewers, listen to me, what he just said. 401ks, well, they're ERISAs.
Right.
These are your retirement funds, basically, your 401ks, your IRAs, your 403bs. Cannot be touched. Cannot be touched by creditors. So why deplete your retirement assets to pay debts?
Right. And people, this is not common knowledge. People don't understand that they could preserve and need to preserve for their own future. That's why we have the retirement account in the first place, not to pay dischargeable, unsecured medical bills, credit cards, typically debt. Now, I'm not saying that it's never appropriate sometimes to catch a house up.
Well, you can possibly take a withdrawal from your
or get a loan,
or get a, take a loan against it's your money.
Sure.
And that might work well for you.
Right,
do
but
that.
I see all the time people coming in having depleted all of this, not because they're behind, but actually because they've depleted all of their assets and are going to be behind.
Yes.
But that's a smaller segment. Most of the time people come in and they don't have that. They don't have good credit. And they come to see me for the debt relief and they just sort of are resigned to poor credit because they've just heard from coworkers and friends and family who got their information from coworkers and friends and families, not from experts with current information.
Isn't that something about people, though, how they will believe family, friends, and associates on financial matters when actually that whole conversation needs to be in the arena of the experts such as yourself?
And it couldn't be more true than today, because finances are much more complicated than they have ever been before. And I don't think that as a culture our society has really done a good job of educating consumers about basic stuff that they really need to pay attention to.
When are you going to learn it? I mean, years ago I did a class for high school. And I'm not a young woman, but on financial literacy, because children didn't even know they didn't know what a check was, they didn't know what a budget was, and they were looking at their parents as a model of what they should do. And we don't want to even get into that, how parents handle their finances. It's like, well, put them all in a mound and see who gets paid first. But we have not really done well as a nation in the area of financial literacy and education. And in fact, I think that a lot of people mean well, but simple things like budget, living on a budget, those things are tough.
It's extremely rare for someone to come in. It happens, but it's very rare for someone to come in for a meeting with me and have a budget.
My goodness.
The first budget that they see is the one I do for them when I say, okay, let's sit down and take a look at what's coming in and what's going out and what's left over. It's a concept that they've never actually applied to themselves.
Well, let's talk about continuing on these bankruptcy myths. Let's talk about the issue of medical, because it's my understanding that the #1 reason for bankruptcy today is medical bills and the inability to pay them.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
The medical bills, and sometimes there's a spillover because a lot of people will pay medical bills on credit cards, and so it looks like a credit card situation, but really has its roots in the medical.
Okay.
Okay. So medical is a huge, and it's not just the people who have no insurance. It's people who have insurance that has become progressively worse in terms of its quality. The deductibles go up and up and up to now I see people with $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 deductibles. Well, you know, there aren't any family budgets that I see regularly that could handle that.
I don't think so.
So even though you've got insurance, effectively you don't have any insurance.
Right.
And so even you know, an appendectomy or the birth of a child could just totally put the family finances into a tailspin. And I see that regularly. So medical bills, with or without insurance, definitely one of the major causes of bankruptcy today.
Does the hospital require full payment at the time of discharge? I've never been, other than birthing children, I don't have any experience in that industry.
My experience in this matter is that they do not.
Okay.
And they typically are happy to send consumers bills for $35,000 and $40,000, and they basically write me a check today is the way the letters. True.
$40,000.
It's
They're
true.
on medication.
I
They're
see them.
crazy.
I see them
You
all the time.
see
Yeah.
them?
You know, I just see.
$40,000.
Yeah.
Pay me now.
Pay me now. Just write a check for
Ah.
the full amount, or call for payment arrangements, and then
Okay.
consumers will call for payment arrangements, and some can make them, and some simply can't because the amount would cost, you know, at $50 a month. You know.
Do they charge interest, may I ask?
Some do, some don't. Actually.
Really? So
yeah.
they're functioning as, it's a loan, a bank.
Well, they're doing the best they can because they know a lot of these cases are not going to be collected, and I'm certainly no expert in how the insurance model works in healthcare,
Okay.
but I know that in many cases the write-offs that I see on some of the statements, they'll accept whatever the insurance pays,
And they're done with it.
and they are selectively aggressive in collections. Now, I see some hospitals, and I won't name them on the air, but
Okay.
they're very,
we
very
know.
aggressive. Others less so. And a lot of times these medical bills are just sent out to collection firms.
Okay, outside agencies. Okay.
Outside agencies. The hospitals themselves will typically write off those debts fairly quickly. It's odd for me to see a medical bill maintained by a hospital for more than 90 days.
So they sell them off
They sell them off to basically collection agencies.
and get paid, what, 10 cents on a dollar, would you say normally?
Typically, it's some
Yeah.
sort of pennies on the
Okay,
dollar
pennies on a
agreement.
dollar.
Sure.
And then the
Right.
collection agency has the receivable, the debt, and then they begin enforcement.
Right. Now, one of the things I do want to mention, and
Okay.
I just for the comfort and peace of mind for the viewers,
Okay.
is a lot of times I get this question: if I owe this hospital money, can I go back to the hospital, or will they refuse to see me? And the answer is, if you walk into the emergency room, they're not going to pull up your billing account and say, "I'm sorry, you can't come in."
Okay.
They accept the consumers, and they provide the treatment. So,
Okay.
and quite often I will discharge a lot of medical bills, and that question comes up a lot, and the answer is they can always go back to the hospital. I've never seen anybody turn down. Now, private physicians, a different matter in
Yeah.
some cases, but the hospitals themselves will accept, you know, anyone. You walk into an emergency room, they're not going to deny treatment for an outstanding bill.
That's comforting.
Yeah.
Because so many people participate in that system. Healthcare is through the roof in the United
Right.
States. It's a major problem, so I can understand.
So that's not something anybody needs to worry about.
Okay, good. Now let's talk about another myth.
Well, I'll never be able to buy a house
That
or
is
a
a
car.
myth. Yeah.
And that's kind of related to I'm always going to have bad credit, because if it's handled properly, my clients are typically getting credit scores of 650 to 750 within 1 year after their bankruptcy discharge.
Are you serious?
I'm serious as I can be.
Are you serious?
Last
That
week,
is amazing.
I had the occasion to speak with a couple that I represented about a year ago. So older folks on Social Security.
Okay.
And they actually had moved to Kentucky because their in-laws have a farm and a house down there. So it worked out well.
Okay.
Their income was about $1,500 a month combined.
Okay.
So
Combined, okay.
little on the low side
Okay,
there.
all right.
I advised them to take some simple steps and do a few things and watch their credit score. And they did that. So because I was talking to them, they were saying, "Oh, thank you for all of the advice. We're doing well down here in Kentucky." I said, "By the way, what's your credit score? Do you know what your credit score is?" And they said, "We do." I said, "What is it?" "It's 690.
690
Yeah.
a year after bankruptcy?
A year after bankruptcy, and that is not uncommon. I just talked to a lady up in Trotwood, and it has not been a year. and we were talking about some things.
So how does this happen? Are you talking about in terms of strategies, having them do a CD or doing secured credit cards? Or
The secured credit cards can play a very, very major positive role in credit recovery. There are some other things that, because I understand how credit scores are formed, because I understand how creditors approach, it really is complex the way these creditors and credit card issuing companies look at things, and the intersection between credit restoration and bankruptcy is one that is not well understood by a lot of people. People presume that they're going to be saddled with poor credit for a long time. They're going to have to pay 22% interest rates on cars. That's not necessarily true. If you take certain steps and you go through them in the right order, and you're diligent about it and careful with your spending not to get too far into debt, then you can rapidly recover your credit very quickly. In fact, in my Chapter 13 practice, now Chapter 13s are bankruptcy repayment plans.
Right.
A lot of, well, that's a myth too. We'll talk about that one.
Okay.
But my Chapter 13s, many of my clients, even before they get out of the bankruptcy, end up with credit scores around 700.
But under a 13, they're repaying debt.
Right, but how much do you think they're repaying? Well, it varies from case to case.
Yes,
but
depending on
most of the
trustee,
people that come to see me, and particularly my seniors, assume, because they've always heard this, but it's not true, assume that a Chapter 13 payment plan is where you pay back all of your debt through a payment plan through a trustee.
Yeah.
Well, that's partially true, but partially not. The part that's not is the all my debt. I regularly write Chapter 13 plans that pay back 1 penny on the dollar. 1 penny.
Mr. West.
Yes.
You are, this is information I did not know. I mean, seriously, I thought that under the federal guidelines that under a 13, where you're going before a trustee, that you have to pay off all debt. I think you have how many years to pay it off?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 years, but that all debt must be paid off under that. So you're saying to me that a trustee will accept shorting the account? Is that what you're saying?
It's a compromise that is based upon a number of different factors. One of them is the person's income. Another one could be, you know, how much equity they have in their house, but now it's all protected up to $125,000 per.
Yes.
Other things that we're looking at paying, like are you paying any taxes? Do you have a car payment? Okay. All of this is put into a formula, and whatever is left over
goes to pay creditor debt?
The unsecured creditor debt, the credit cards and medical bills typically, and it can be as low as a penny on the dollar. And that's a perfectly legal plan that allows someone to reorganize their finances, save their homes in many cases from foreclosure. Once you get beyond 90 days, typically the credit or the mortgage companies won't even take your payment.
Exactly.
But we can force them to take the payment in a Chapter 13. And we don't have to necessarily even pay back the credit cards and medical bills. We can focus on saving that house, focus on saving the car, and discharge all of the rest of the debt at virtually no payment.
Which a trustee would really want to see happen anyway.
Right. The trustee system, the bankruptcy judges, very, very supportive of our consumers.
Right.
And they want to see people succeed and reorganize and continue to keep their houses and their cars.
Amazing. Amazing. I want to say again about, give me your phone number again because our time is wrapping up.
Okay.
And this is so amazing. For those of you that are viewing, here is the book. There it is. Zoom in, guys, if you would. I want them to see. It's called Debt Free, Just Ahead, The Real Truth About Debt Relief, authored by Richard E. West, attorney at law, with practice from Tip City. There it is right there again. Debt Free, Just Ahead. The Real Truth About Debt Relief. Give this man an A++. You have opened up my understanding about some things that I needed to know. And I'm supposed to know this stuff. But as I tell people all the time, you cannot know everything.
Absolutely not.
I guarantee you, it's a wild, wild west out here anymore. And people such as yourself do such good service to people that are having tough times, especially our seniors. They are having tough times. And I wish I could give a note of optimism and say that things are getting better. For some people, things are not getting better.
It's true.
And therefore they need some relief. Do you have any final remarks before we conclude this conversation today?
I do, and the one thing that keeps people from finding the answers to their problems is their fear.
Fear.
Their fear of the unknown.
I was going to say that, the fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't cost anything to find out what options are available. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't do anything different, at least you know more once you have your options explained. So, you know, it doesn't hurt to call and find out what's out there.
Give us your number again.
It's 937
937
748
748
1749.
1749. And you have offices spanning Dayton, Fairborn, Fairfield in Cincinnati area, Kenwood in Cincinnati area, and of course here in Dayton.
Right.
And I just think that this has been such an educational seminar conversation for me. I've learned a lot today, and I want to thank you from the depths of my heart for your compassion for people, for your commitment to provide high-quality legal alternatives for people that are going through a dark time in their life. Nothing can be more devastating emotionally than a divorce, even death. The spouse dies and a widow finds out she doesn't have the money.
Right, we see that a lot.
Yes, she's stuck with the stuff and she thinks she has to pay these bills, and many times they don't.
No.
They don't at all, and that's your area. Same thing with job loss, same thing for divorce. Life comes at you fast, but I want to thank you for representing well the work that you do, and consider me your friend.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to share this information with your viewers. I wish there was a way that I could just sit down and meet with everybody who might benefit from the new law and all of the things that are available, but for a lot of different reasons people never find out about.
Well, on that note, I want to conclude today's segment of The Power of Money with my very special guest, attorney at law Richard E. West, who specializes in credit management, credit counseling, Bankruptcy 13, and just Bankruptcy 7. Again, for those of you that are at a fork in the road in your own personal lives and your family is experiencing crisis, for those of you that are pastors or in any form of counseling, you've got to be aware of the times we're in, and that you need to talk to people that can give you sound solutions to financial problems. And so I would have to conclude today with, again, knowledge is power, but knowledge that is leveraged is even better. So I thank you for listening in, watching. As always, Michelle Graves signing off with God bless you. You take care.